So, do you know what to do if someone gets hurt while you're out on the trail? Hi, everybody. I'm Rob, and this is Storm Crew Overland. We go talk about going on adventures, road tripping, camping, and just generally getting out and enjoying life. On this week's episode, we're going to continue our series on Overland and Wilderness First Aid based on principles derived from TCCC, which is Tactical Combat Casualty Care. Thanks if you watched last week's video over massive bleeding. Thank you for bearing with me. I was on the road for work and I had to record in my hotel room without my good camera. Didn't have my good computer to edit. Had to do everything on my phone and my tablet. Uh, did the best I could. Hopefully it wasn't too bad. So thanks for sticking with me. This week, you can tell by the rig here, I'm back home. Got the good camera, got everything like that. So we're gonna continue on our series. This week we're gonna focus on airway and respiration and circulation. And actually, we're going to go ahead and finish up with hypothermia as well. So, on the first video, we talked about massive bleeding. Basically, we're talking about the whole March patient assessment. Starts with massive bleeding, then it's airway, respiration, circulation, and finally hypothermia. General idea here with this order of things is we're looking for the things that we can do to prevent the person from dying the fastest. Whatever's the most likely to kill them the fastest, we want to assess that and treat it first, and then kind of go down the ladder from there towards things that aren't as serious. And the first video, we basically spent the entire first video, and it was a longer than normal video on just the M part, the massive bleeding, because that is one that can definitely be life threatening, but it's also something that you can treat at the first aid, first responder, not EMT kind of level. There's a lot of things you can do there, especially with just a little bit of gear. You can do a lot to try to save somebody's life. So for this video, what we're going to do is we're going to go over the rest of March. We're going to go over the airway, respiration, circulation, and hypothermia. How to assess, how to treat, and then next week's video will be the kind of wrap up video where we go over how to treat other injuries that may not be life threatening but still need to get treatment, stuff like that. This is still that life threatening part. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next section. All right, so we're going to move on and talk about airway. Now, this isn't are they breathing? This is simply, is their airway open? Do they have the ability to breathe? Sorry, my notes are flying over the place over here. I'll move those down there real quick. So the biggest thing here is, like you said, you're just kind of trying to check, make sure their airway's open. If they're conscious, this should be pretty easy. Are they? If they're conscious, they're probably breathing. You don't need to worry about it too much. This is more if they're unconscious. There's not a whole lot you can really do at this point. Main thing is just to make sure their airway is open as possible, give them the best chance possible of breathing. If you're not sure if they're breathing, we're going to do look, listen, and feel. Because injuries don't happen in nice, sterile, quiet environments. They happen at the worst possible time in the worst possible places where it's going to be windy and loud or dark or who knows what. And that's why we're going to do look, listen, and feel. We want the greatest chance to be able to tell if they're breathing. So look, we're going to be looking to see if their chest is rising and falling. This is not foolproof. This is why we do all three. If they've got a heavy jacket on, in military things, we worry about like if they had plate carriers and stuff like that on. Backpack straps, whatever it is, anything could get in the way and make it hard to tell if they're breathing or if it's just dark outside. So after you look, you're also going to try to listen. You're going to put your ear up towards the person's face, up toward their mouth and nose, and you want to see if you can hear air coming in and out. This is hard to do in a perfect environment. If it's windy or loud or anything like that, it's going to be even harder. So like I said, got to do all three. Finally, we're going to get down to that feel. What we're going to do is we're going to take our cheek. Our cheek is a really sensitive part of your body. And you're going to put it in front of their mouth and nose and see if you can feel air coming in and out. And, kind of get that little breeze from the person. Kind of like the other things. This is going to be hard to do if it's windy. But we're going to have all three. Hopefully you can get a pretty good idea whether they're breathing or not. If they're not breathing, first thing you do is you want to check and make sure the airway is open. You want to make sure there's nothing like lodged in their mouth. You don't want to go sticking, if you can visibly see something's there, yeah, get it out. If you can't tell, don't go blindly sticking your fingers in their mouth trying to do something, or just. But like I said, if you happen to see something in their mouth in the way, get it out. Other than that, all we're going to do is we have two forms that we're going to do to open their airway up. And when I say that, we're talking about the whole trachea stuff like that here. If the person is, if you do not suspect any kind of spine or neck issue, what we're going to do is called the head tilt chin lift. And basically, the person, you're going to have them laying on the ground, and you're going to kneel down by their head. You're going to take two fingers and put it under their chin, two fingers on their forehead. You're going to push their forehead back, and with the ones on your chin, you're going to kind of push their head up just to try to help open this up as much as possible. You want to have almost, when you're down like this, your trachea is bending to kind of get there. So you want to get it all the way open, almost straight line. Just a nice straight shot, easy to breathe, nothing's in the way. Now, this is where things get a little trickier. If you do suspect any kind of cervical, spinal, neck, any kind of injury like that, and if you don't know, I mean, if you roll up on someone that's been in a bad car accident, you might want to suspect that. If it looks like you're out hiking and you come across somebody that's next to a boulder, you think they were climbing on, you think they fell off, you might want to suspect that. Stuff like that. It's all situational. You're going to have to use your best judgment. But if you do suspect any kind of that spine or neck issue, we don't want to go be moving their head around and moving their neck and possibly making things worse, possibly paralyzing them, possibly killing them. We don't want that. We're trying to make things better. So what we're going to do is called the jaw thrust. So imagine the person is laying down on the ground, on their back, face up. Hopefully, that'd be the easiest way for this to work. What you're going to do is you're going to go kneel down at the top of their head. So you're going to be kneeling down kind of at the crown of their head. You're going to take your arms, and with your forearms, you're going to stabilize their head. Now, you want to reduce as much movement as possible. You're going to take two fingers on each hand, and right in the very back of your jaw, it's hard to tell with the beard, sorry, but right in that corner of the jaw, you're going to push out. It's hard to do on somebody that's conscious because your body fights it with like a reflex. And all you're trying to do is kind of push the jaw out a little bit to try to help open this up without actually moving the neck. You don't want to be pushing on anything soft back here. Make sure you're pushing on jawbone. You want to be pushing on something hard. Anything other than that, you can start actually doing damage, and it's just super uncomfortable, and you're going to hurt the person. Don't want to do that. Okay, so that kind of wraps it up for airway. We want to see if they're breathing, do the whole look, listen, and feel. And then, like I said, if there's something you can tell blocking their airway, deal with that. But other than that, you're going to do either the head tilt chin lift or the jaw thrust if you suspect neck or spinal issues, and make sure their airway is open, make sure they have the ability to breathe. All right, so we've moved on. We've talked about airway. We've made sure they have the ability to breathe. Now we're going to start talking about respiration in that March concept. So when it comes to respiration, what we're doing is we're making sure that they're breathing and breathing effectively. The biggest thing we're looking for at this step is what would be technically called a tension pneumothorax, or like a collapsed lung from a sucking chest wound. Basically, anytime that if someone's got a penetrating injury kind of on the upper half of their chest, it can cause a collapsed lung. What you have to think of is you got your lungs. They're like a balloon, and when you breathe in, they fill up. When you breathe out, they collapse, and you've got a space on each side of your chest for that balloon to fill up and deflate and fill up and deflate. And if you get a hole in your chest wall, and you start getting air in there, like when that balloon deflates, air is going to suck in that hole. That cavity is going to fill up with air, and next time you go to breathe in, that balloon is not going to have enough room to inflate because that cavity is already going to be full of air. So that causes a collapsed lung. Like I said, technically it's called a tension pneumothorax. You don't care about that. What you're looking for here is if you actually can hear like a hissing kind of sucking sound coming from their chest wound area. If their chest looks like lopsided, it's because stuff's not filling up right. Or even, hang on one second. Sorry about that. Life distracted me for a second. The final kind of sign you're looking for is if the person's breathing. Like I said, they can be conscious and breathing, but feeling like they just can't catch their breath. And that's what's happening because they're really only working off one lung at that point. They've kind of cut their lung capacity in half. And they may not even know what's wrong. They just be like, I just can't quite catch my breath. I just don't feel right. So those are the signs you're looking for. When it comes to sucking chest wounds, what we're going to do treatment-wise is you want to seal up the hole with something that's going to keep air from going through it. You want something not air permeable. There's some stuff you can improvise, but realistically, they have special bandages called chest seals. There's an Asherman chest seal. There's a couple of other brands. And basically, they're big, sticky things of rubber. As someone that has a very hairy chest, I really hope I never get one of these put on me because they're very sticky and they're not coming off easily. But if there's a hole in my chest and it's making my lung collapse, slap that sucker on there. Keeps any more air from getting in there. And in the process, you also need to think, if this person has a hole on their chest in the front, there might be one in the back. If they got shot or had a branch go through their chest or whatever it is, whatever caused this injury, if it caused an entry wound, it may have caused an exit wound. So you need to check that, treat it the same way. And finally, if this ends up being like if they're bleeding a lot from this area, like I said, that upper chest where the lungs are kind of area, we talked in the massive bleeding section about wound packing with like quick clot and stuff. We don't want to do that here. We don't want to start filling up that lung cavity with quick clot or with gauze or anything else like that. We want to make sure it has plenty of room for your lung to actually inflate. So things you can do to improvise if you don't have an actual chest seal with you, and it's like a lot of these things, chest seal's not super expensive, and it's not something you really need to like worry about getting to practice with. It's a big sticky rubber bandage. You peel the thing off and you slap it on. You just want to cover the whole thing and stop air from getting in. But if you don't have one and you have to improvise, anything that's going to stop air from going in and out. Realistically, duct tape is not a horrible option. If you just get a couple pieces of duct tape over there to keep air from getting in and out. If you can tape down a piece of plastic or a thick piece of like rubbery plasticky material, that's something they teach us the military is use. Like if you have an MRE wrapper, that's a great thing you can use. Something along the lines of like saran wrap, but probably thicker, that's going to be a little more durable. But that's the general idea you're looking for. All right, so that kind of wraps up for respiration. Let's go ahead and move on into circulation. Okay, and now we're going to move into circulation. So we've made sure they have no more massive bleeding. We've made sure their airway's open. We've made sure they have the ability to breathe through respiration. And finally, we're going to move into circulation. Now, we're getting towards the end of our March acronym here. So that means we've gotten away from the big life-threatening things and we're moving into slightly less serious things. So the first thing we're going to do here, though, when it comes to circulation, is we're going to double check and reassess all the bleeding control measures we've already put into place. So if we've got a tourniquet on someone, we're going to double check that tourniquet. We're not going to take it off. We're not going to loosen it, but we're just going to check and make sure, is that bleeding still under control? Same thing if we've had to pack a wound and put an emergency bandage on it. Is it working still? And if either one of these things, if you check any of these bleeding control measures and they're not working, it's not holding up, they're still bleeding, just kind of go from there. If you put a tourniquet on someone and it's helped, but it didn't quite stop the bleeding, maybe put another one on. If you've done quick clot and a pressure bandage on someone and they're still bleeding, maybe put more direct pressure on it. Whatever it takes to just to stop that bleeding. So just go ahead and reassess that. Once you've done that, we're going to start making sure the person is comfortable. If they're conscious, this is easy. You just kind of let them talk to you. If they want to sit down, let them sit down. If they want to stand up, let them stand up. Their body's going to tell them what's good for them. It's going to be whatever's comfortable. If they're not conscious, what you want to do is lay them in what we call the recovery position. Basically, you lay them on their side. If they're injured, if their side's injured, don't lay them on the injured side. Put the injured side up. And you're going to put, so if I was laying down if I was going to be laying down this way, you'd have this arm kind of tucked and this arm kind of out, basically just to kind of keep you from. You want to be leaning slightly forward so that if the patient is bleeding in their mouth or anything, or if they throw up, that it just automatically kind of comes out and doesn't go back down their throat. But you don't want them to fall on their face either, so you kind of prop them up with their arm. Same thing with your legs. You're gonna have one leg out, one leg bent, kind of like almost like a kickstand, to kind of keep the person on their side, leaning slightly forward. After you do that, the biggest thing we have left in the circulation phase is to look for signs of shock. This is shock is weird. If you've never been in shock, congratulations. I have. I don't like it. I don't want to ever be there again. The biggest thing for me when I was in shock, and something I've seen other people too, it wasn't just me, is you get stupid. When you're in shock, what's going on is your body is diverting everything it has to your core to try to keep you alive, whether it's blood flow, oxygen, all that fun stuff. It's just trying to keep you alive. You're not getting as much oxygen to your brain. You're not getting as much blood flow to your arms and fingers and stuff. So your dexterity is going to go down. You're not going to be thinking right. You might start getting kind of cool sweat, like sweaty, clammy feeling. And person's skin might even start kind of turning gray from that lack of circulation as the body's pulling all that blood into the core. Yeah, if you see this, there's not a whole lot you can do. It's more be aware of it, but keep the person covered. If they're getting cold, cover them up. Keep them laying down. If their circumstance permit, have them lay on their back with their feet elevated up above their heart. That'll kind of help keep all the blood where it needs to be. It'll help keep them slightly more comfortable. Biggest thing is they're probably going to be stupid, so just don't leave them. Babysit them. Make sure that they're getting help and everything's going to work out good. Finally, from here, we're going to move into the last section of March, which is going to be hypothermia. All right, so it's been kind of a long day. I got to grab my notes real quick, make sure I'm not missing anything when it comes to the hypothermia section. So let's see. Basically, it sounds weird to think of hypothermia because a lot of times when we're out doing things, it's not that cold. Even today, it's 96 degrees outside. But if someone was injured and lost enough blood, which is what your body uses to regulate temperature, you could have someone go hypothermic on a 95-degree sunny day just because their body can't move that heat around the way it needs to. So that's why we're looking for hypothermia. Some of the signs you're going to be looking for is if the person starts slurring their speech, if they're drowsy when they shouldn't be. I mean, we all get drowsy sometimes, but drowsy. If they start shivering, especially if it's not that cold out, that's a sign you need to be worried about them. Like I said, this is all natural things that come from a person that's going to have a good amount of blood loss. So no big deal. We see these are just the things we look for, and then what we do to help kind of prevent hypothermia or help not necessarily treat it, but just sort of deal with it. We're going to try to keep the clothes on the person, try to keep some of their heat in their body. The only exception is if they're wet. If their clothes are just soaked in blood, or if they're wet from they fell in a river, or where it's been pouring rain, whatever it is, if their clothes are wet, try to get them out, try to get some dry clothes on them, get a blanket on them, something like that. Just something to help keep their heat in their body. Like I said, cover with a blanket. And finally, if you can, it's all, a lot of this is all situational, but if you can, get the person off the ground. The ground, a lot of times, is not nearly as warm as the air, and it's definitely probably not as warm as your body temp needs to be. It's not going to be that 98.6 degrees. So if you've got a person that's got a reduced amount of blood flow, laying on the ground, hey, just got to wave at my neighbors, laying on the ground's going to start pulling that heat out of their body, which is just going to make the hypothermia worse. All right, so that kind of wraps up hypothermia. That really gets us through the entire March thing that we were talking about, the massive bleeding, the airway, respiration, circulation, and hypothermia. Like I said, it's really just based on the things that are most likely to kill the person down to least likely, we're just focusing on the things you can treat with the bare minimum equipment and the bare minimum of knowledge. None of this is like EMT level stuff. This is basic, basic, basic. This is the same basic skills that we teach to literally everyone in the Air Force, and the way I understand it is everybody in the military is getting this exact same basic level training. And trust me, if some of those guys can do it, you can do it too. It's not hard. Final reminder, this is not training. This is just some knowledge. This is just some more information for you to give you an idea. I encourage you, seek out actual training. Whether it's a Red Cross first aid class, whether it's an actual TCCC class, wilderness first aid class, there's a stop the bleed classes, any of those things. These are all great things. Never stop learning, especially stuff that's going to save somebody's life. Hopefully this information has been helpful for you. Next week, we're going to come back and we'll kind of wrap up and do more minor injury stuff, burns, minor bleeds that aren't life-threatening, stuff like that, eye injuries. That'll be kind of our wrap-up, and that'll finish out this whole series on Overland and Wilderness First Aid. I really appreciate your watching. If you are watching this on YouTube, just realize we also release the audio as a podcast. You can find it wherever podcasts are found. Just search Stormcrow Overland. If you are listening to this as a podcast, I'd encourage you to go on YouTube, watch some of the videos. So you can find us there at Stormcrow Overland. You can also find us on Instagram at, you guessed it, Stormcrow Overland. And finally, you can send me an email at stormcrowoverland@gmail.com. On any of those things, I would greatly appreciate a like, comment, follow, subscribe, a message, anything like that. Let me know, have you enjoyed these series? Do you have questions about things? Is there something else you'd like to hear me talk about? Do you want my opinion on something? Are you coming to Oklahoma soon and you want to know somewhere to go? Any of that kind of stuff. I really appreciate any of that feedback. I love hearing from folks. It kind of helps keep me motivated, keep me going. So that really wraps up this week's video. So just remember, sometimes you have to go out and hopefully not do any of this first aid stuff before you can find yourself. Thanks for watching.